There are plenty of people out there making the claim that Biden's promise to nominate a black woman to the Supreme Court is discriminatory. Discrimination is a matter of justice, ethics, and morals, so obviously it's open to interpretation. But I'll tell you why I don't think Biden's promise is discriminatory. The definition of discrimination at issue in this situation is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, and sex. Obviously, you can find different definitions in different places, but this one from the Oxford Dictionary seems to fall most in line with legal authorities like the Justice Department. Let's take the unjust part of the definition first, which is defined as not being based on what is morally right and fair. Well, that gets pretty complicated with something like a SCOTUS nominee. In order to be fair, everyone who has a right to be a nominee should have the opportunity to be a nominee, but the Constitution specifies no qualifications to be a justice. It doesn't even say you need to be a citizen. All it says is that the president nominates someone and the Senate votes to confirm them, so really no one has the right to be a nominee. You can't even put yourself up for consideration like you can with normal jobs by applying to them. You can only try to put yourself in a place to increase your chances to be considered and then hope a president considers you. It's up to the sole discretion of the president. But is the promise morally right? Obviously that's hugely subjective, but it basically points to the next qualifier, prejudice. If the preference is based on prejudice, then we can pretty safely say that it's morally wrong. If it's not, then we have to look at what it is based on and evaluate the morals of that. Prejudice is a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience or dislike, hostility, or unjust behavior deriving from unfounded opinions. When he announced his pledge, Biden said, quote, "I'm looking forward to making sure there's a black woman on the Supreme Court, to make sure we in fact get everyone represented," end quote. So his pledge is the result of wanting black women to be represented on the Supreme Court. That's not prejudice. Likely the pledge is probably driven more by politics than representation, but that isn't prejudice either. And looking back to the question of justice, it's entirely defensible to claim that it's just to want to ensure representation on the Supreme Court, particularly when that representation has never existed. It also serves as a pretty good justification for increasing the size of the court altogether, a justification that someone you might know fairly well is used. To argue that Biden's pledge is discriminatory, you must expand the definition of discrimination to include all instances of preferring race, gender, or sex, but to do that you must argue that there is no instance when it is just to have such a preference. If we are to test that here, you must argue that there is nothing to be gained by having black women represented on the Supreme Court, and there is nothing lost in not having them represented on the Supreme Court. Otherwise, it's morally defensible to decide to put a black woman on the Supreme Court, which is what Biden has done here explicitly. Personally, I do not think those arguments can be made successfully or convincingly. There are plenty of people who have dedicated much of their professional lives to convincing people that any assertive attempt to correct underrepresentation is discriminatory in of itself, and that contention will continue going forward. I hope they lose.